You good? Excellent. Well, thanks so much for having me here. So today we've had a lot of discussion around research. I've been listening in, and around thinking about how research can be part of product sort of discovery as well as development, and how we can have research help us create useful as well as usable interactive experiences. So today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about material design, and I head up research for material design. And I want to tell you the story of how research came about and where we're at now. And so material design is a set of products, but also material design as a system and a design system, and material design as a service. And I hopefully will illustrate how we've come to where we are now. So here you can see some of the beautiful design system components, some of the visual design, the colors. So everything I'm going to talk about today is about digital design for devices like this one. And this will be probably the only speaker who will tell you it is okay to have a look at your device if you want, to follow along with some of the visual, interactive, animation, and motion experiences on your personal device. So, what is a design system? How many of you are familiar with design systems? Fantastic. I don't have to spend too much time. I was anticipating, but I just wanted to check. So design systems have become popular since about 2011. And of course, for designers and developers, a design system will give you guidelines, potentially engineered components, give you recommendations for things like form, shape, line, texture, color, some of these beautiful colors that you're seeing here, space, motion and movement, typography, and fonts. And I put content here in brackets because I think we all know that content and communication is also a fantastic design area, and guidelines for having great content contributions are really important. So, why do people have design systems? Because, well, they allow you to scale. So if you've got more than one product and you're scaling up, you can actually reuse components, you can reuse guidelines, you can save yourself energy thinking about, how am I going to keep something, how am I going to scale up and keep things consistent? How am I going to have brand consistency? But also efficiency. So one of the things that my team has been looking at is understanding how designers and developers get their jobs done and how design systems help them be not just efficient, but also enjoy the process along the way. So teamwork. Design systems can really help you with teamwork, and in particular can help you by connecting design to development and engineering and to evaluation, as you'll see, because the design system can also point to places where you do effective evaluation for that usefulness and that usability that I mentioned. So this is the way I see the world, and this is the world that I'm going to try and illustrate how we came to in material. So you'll see this diagram over and over again. I believe that great design systems are a deep partnership and collaboration between engineering, design, and research. And all of this comes together when you have great program and product management. Because I think these are the pieces and the areas that really will drive you forward and keep you on track and create great products, or enable others to create great products. So here we are today. It's 2019. And you can kind of see, I'm going to go backwards in time. But before I go backwards in time, is this one better? I have so many artifacts now. I'm just going to pop this one down. Here we go. So I'm going to take you backwards in time. So before I go, we talk about Google scale. Currently, Material has hundreds and thousands of users in terms of app designers and developers. Material design shows up on millions of websites and is used by billions of users. So we have this scale, but we weren't always there. But what are people seeing now? So here you see some of the designs. So in 2018, Material released what we call material theming, Because what we wanted to do was make sure that external developers and designers who use material, because we are open source, can actually brand effectively for their own contexts, can really create a color scheme, a feel, animation that reflects the personality of their products. So here are some of the color schemes and grids. And you can see all of this on the materials site. And this is very like most design systems. But I wanted to give you a flavor of where we came to in 2008, which was the second big push of material design, the first one being, as I said, in 2018. Did I say 2008? I did? Yeah, there you go. Time, it's just imagined. We also have fonts. We also have typography in many languages. And we are increasingly investigating things like variable fonts and figuring out how that will change the design process and how that will change the communication and content process as well. We've been having some great conversations around what kind of fonts would you use if you were a bank in terms of personality versus an entertainment site. And there's some beautiful research in that area. We look at shape. You've seen some of this, so allowing you to have these kind of cutouts and so forth. And here's some more of the branding stuff. So one of the things that we explored, the design team in particular explored, was all these different kinds of examples of how you could take material and take it into your own space with your own color scheme and your own kind of animations, using your imagination. Here we got some motion going. And I don't know, I think some of these are quite beautiful, and their exploration. So one of the things I also like to talk about is that design systems don't tell you what to do. They guide you, and they invite exploration. Design systems really are generative. They're about inspiration, and I hope you see some of that here. So here's where we were, where material design was launched in 2014. Some of you may know the background to this, but a lot of people say to me, why is it called material? A lot of people actually think that I run a hardware research team, which is a little surprising to me. It's like, oh no. Back in 2014, it was mostly Google that used material with a little bit of the external world. As I've just said, that there are hundreds and thousands of developers and designers now engaging with material. And back in the day, I said you'd see this diagram a lot. Back in the day, research was kind of informal and small, if you like. Engineering was pretty solid, and design was the lead. And brilliant, brilliant designers were doing explorations. And I'm going to show you some of those explorations from the early days. I was not with material design then, so I found this very inspirational when I joined, to know that people were playing with shadow. And so the idea here is that material really has this depth that will invite you into interaction. It's not all flat design. And so here are some of the, if you like, informal research explorations that the brilliant designers did to think about what do we want to do with this idea of materiality? How are we going to use shadow such that we really leverage the human psychoperceptual system to invite certain kinds of interaction and say certain things are more important than others, to draw the eye and the mind to certain kinds of things that we want you to look at, to call out, if you like. So here are some of the explorations again with experimentation. Now at this point, the experimentation was very much designing, prototyping, exploring, but it wasn't necessarily engaging with users or consumers or end users. But I still think this kind of foundational exploration is very, very important to us in all walks of the kinds of things we do. This is actually cardboard prototypes that you may not have seen, and these are currently in the MoMA, I think. So these were actual physical prototypes where lighting was used to create shadow so that it could then be taken into and inspire the digital. And I personally think these are really, really fun. Again, exploration, experimentation. You might perhaps recognize this one? Yeah? I just think that that's so fabulous that you see that shadow that was played with, where there was light and imagery created and photos taken, led to this. So those early explorations, I think, are familiar to us and are really important. Here's another sort of sense of this elevation with what is the most salient thing that appears perceptually to you to be the most important because of the shadow and elevation. Here you've got another perhaps familiar kind of application where you have this sort of base substrate and things are layered on top as they would be needed perceptually and potentially through a task interaction. So here is the materiality of material. It is inspired by this idea of this three-dimensionality. And it's inspired by the idea that things that are sort of brighter in your visual field and don't have shadow may be the thing on the top that invites you to act and interact. So by 2015, material design had attracted many thousands of users, many thousands. And research was still pretty informal. And there was a question, should we build research? And I mean, in this instance, not this experimentation and informal research, but more of a formal research team. And that was where I got into conversation with folks there, and in particular, a couple of the brilliant designers and interaction designers who were at the beginning of material, who had been very influenced by and impressed by having the idea of user research. So they sort of said, hey, do you think we should set up a research team? And I was like, sure. So 2016, myself and one other researcher, Michael Gilbert, we partnered with a couple of interaction designers and a developer to do the first real research study, which I would call formally set out and experimental research study, which had a qualitative and a quantitative part to it. And part of my talk today is going to be about this deep collaboration across disciplines, and this was a really perfect example, and it made my heart sing that the first big research study we did was a deep collaboration across these different disciplines. And here it was. This, as you see, it's a text field, and people were very interested in what should our text field look like. There were many different options and many different ways you could push the text field. And so, working with the research team, we came up with a number of things that many of you will recognize as user-centered questions. Can a user identify or discover the text field? Is it readable in any sense? Is it findable in the form? Anybody in this room gone, where do I put the text in? Maybe. Legibility, do they understand the content? Does the label make sense? And can they get through what they need to do quickly and efficiently? And so the team actually built this. It's a research instrument to test this particular text field, but all of the different permutations we could come up with. And here you see a number of different kind of versions that got tested. And we also created some gloriously ugly forms. Maybe you've seen a few ugly forms in your time. To actually see if people could scan and find the information they needed and actually act in the way that we wanted them to. And we ran this with thousands and thousands of users. We had 144 conditions, and we had people do all of those different tasks, like find the text field, type in the text field, and looked at where they typed on hotspots. We also asked them, which one did you like best? What did you find good? What did you not? So qualitative and quantitative. And we did some data analysis. This, you don't need to understand it all. All you need to know is on the right-hand side, those are the text fields that performed better across all of the different conditions and all of the different questions that we asked. The ones on the left performed worse with users. And one of the interesting outcomes of this was not to say, this is the right one, but to say, here is the space of options available to you which map the best to user needs and user performance behaviors across the different criteria that we brainstormed together were important for us. So again, this is a partnership tool for a discussion and an ongoing discussion, and it is not the end of the conversation. And so here we are. This was one of the text fields that we recommended on the spec site, on the material.io site, which was based in data. And then we also wrote up and talked about the method so that you could, roll your own at home if you wanted to do this kind of study for your context. So that was a really great study that was very successful and incidentally actually caught the eye of the accessibility team, which works across Google. And they had been trying to get some real data on accessibility and things like text fields, and this delivered the data they needed. And we have developed a partnership with them, and all of our studies going forward have always included people with accessibility needs, visual impairment being one. So that ended up being a bigger collaboration beyond material. We also, if we talk about that as a sort of component study, we also started looking at workflow. We started to talk to designers and developers and say, how do you do your job? And I think earlier today you heard from Tricia and you heard from Steve, Tricia Wang, Steve Portigal, about foundational research, which might not have a particular application, being really critical. So we decided to understand what is the day-to-day of your designer or developer in different contexts, in small firms, in large firms, in corporations, individual contributors who may be consultants. And we did studies to have a look at how people solve problems and how design gets done and where material as well as other tools actually fit into people's lives. What works? What doesn't work? What are the pain points of the handoff, if there are any, between design and development? And as we started doing this work, we started to figure out that it's not just the products, which are the components. It's not just the product and platform, which is the material.io site, on which we carry out things like card sorts to make sure the architecture is right for different user segments to traverse the site. And I'll come back to that later. But it's also that these touch points that the designers and developers discussed really were a sort of service model. So we started to think of material design as a service system as well, with great touch points. And at this point, it was really fun to see a lot of the designers and a couple of the researchers went off and took service design courses to start to say, oh, how do we research whether we're having impact across the touch points, not just in a particular area that I work in as a motion designer or as an interaction designer. So this was about changing the culture of the whole team to be evidentiary and inspirational, if you want, inspired by human-centered service design as well as user experience research. Here's one of the things. This is Steve Portigal and MJ Broadbent worked with me, because remember the team at this point was, I think, 3, to help me specify what it might look like to lay out this kind of build, evaluate, deploy, and you don't need to see the details. I'm sure you've seen these before. But this was all based in data, and here, to my excitement, were all of the places people said, research is needed. Can anybody imagine how happy I was? So here we are. We're looking for research. Yay, research. We need research. And I went, This was a success fail. I was getting so many requests for research, and the designers and the developers, the engineers were saying, hey, can we partner with a researcher? We really want to work with a researcher. Yay, researcher. And Steve Portigal mentioned in his talk this idea of demand and supply. And so I created what I called a moat. I created a form. Has anyone else created a form as a moat? And I was like, just fill out my form, and I'll get to the backlog. Thank you for the research request. And I was like, I was going home saying to everybody, oh, no, success fail. And then a miracle happened. Da, da, da. I had put a Band-Aid on an arterial research need gash, and I found a program manager, and she's sitting right here, Zaina Al-Hawi. And I looked for Icon. Please, everybody, go and check it out. Look online, Icon program manager, and somehow you get a big hug with hearts. Nice. So anyway, so finally got program manager and established a research program development with Zaina, who's sitting here. And she and I really built this up. So here you see my triangle building up over time. And here, after a long time working with the researchers, the designers, the developers, the senior leadership about what we need for velocity of research, what resources we have, which we could also now say, can we have some more resources? What impact we're going to have. So Any project that comes in now to us goes through Zaina's sort of system of management, and we talk through things in open office hours, and we get research requests, and we look at the resources we have, how many researchers we have, and what time allocation. What is the potential impact of the particular product, so we can prioritize. And we really prioritize projects where partnership with engineering and design is key. We don't, we prioritize things that are impactful, but if somebody just comes and says, no, you just need to go and do the research and throw it over the wall, we try to have a conversation about how, it'd be kind of nice to partner on this, don't you think? And we're doing a really good job. And then we move to execution. And again, we're changing that culture of how we can all work together effectively. So the other thing that happened in 2017 was our product management practice expanded. We'd had very little product management support, and then we got a fabulous product manager, and then more and more coming in. And this really changed a lot, because now with product management in place and program management in place as a substrate to this design, research, engineering partnership, we could really start cooking. And this is closer to where we are now. And you can sort of vaguely see in the background one of our PMs, our lead PM, Leland Rekas. And you can see how we're starting to try and map to the OKRs. We're looking at needs and opportunity discovery with foundational research. We're doing iterative research and launching rapid research programs so that we can get into this more agile process. As I mentioned, material had been a sort of a big launch and another big launch. We're now doing continual update, continual launches, much more agile, and we're working really closely to set the goals, to bring the data from research into meaningful decision-making with our PMs. So here you can sort of see, we've got research integrated, but the discovery opportunity is still there, even when it's a validation study. Because one of the biggest things we do is that Zaina will tell you, no project is done until the data, until the report, until any readout is archived in our research archive. We have, from the beginning of the program management setup, made sure that we keep all of the research reports easily accessible. We publish them internally at Google on our research archive site, and we reuse data. We reuse insights. We reinvestigate insights in order to try and make sure that the resources we have, with a relatively limited set of people in the team, is always the best value, and we're never redoing work, and we're always informing each other. We have monthly all-hands where we revisit old data and have a look again. We have a newsletter that we publish out that goes across a lot of the people in the company. We have 200+ people currently subscribed to that, and an archive of that. So you can see we're starting to get this sort of lovely process in place where everyone feels that they can participate. And I do think that's key, making everyone feel welcome and that they're part of this. It's not researchers and designers, and I think others have mentioned that. It's that we're all interested in the same thing, which is the insights that will lead to great products. So we're researchers, designers, engineers, product managers, all having the conversation focused on the end goal. And so here we are. We're also just setting up a research analytics program. And this really got going last year. And I'm very excited about this, because we didn't just say, okay, we're just going to go and get data from anywhere. We ran a series of data mapping workshops, and this is Jude Yu, you can see him there, who runs this. So we got a number of the people in the team, PM, PGM, research, design, engineering, to start to say, if we were going to look at data sources and or do instrumentation and or do experimentation, what would we need to do in order to understand whether there is awareness of material design in the world? You can imagine sentiment detection over social media streams being one source. How can we understand how people are taking up and understanding content on our site or not? What do we need to do? So we've got diary studies going. We have longitudinal studies that go over several months of engaging with designers and developers to tell us what they're experiencing on our site. Adoption. We're starting to think about, well, what kind of data streams do you need to know whether somebody's really adopted material design? And so, we've got our GitHub repositories. We've actually got some tracking around activity there. We've got an issue tracker that we then do qualitative analysis on to see what are the issues that are coming up for people. Implementation. We look to see whether the engineered components are usable, useful, and available to the developers who would like to use them by doing interviews, by doing questionnaires, and again, by tracking online. We're also really interested in adaptation. So working both with internal partners at Google, but external, we've been trying to track how many different design systems and specs there are that are maybe inspired by material, but not necessarily material. Because, like I said, this is about inspiring people to be creative. This is a provocation, it's an invitation, because ultimately the goal is great end-user experiences. So we want to know about that. The final one is appropriation. And the way I think about appropriation is that somebody out there looks at something like material design and says, as a design system, that inspires me. I am going to go and figure out a design system for my world, which might be a different world. And we've been having conversations with folks who are designing much more for example, augmented and virtual reality, which we currently don't cover a lot, and we have ideas about. But how cool to have people say, hey, that materiality thing that inspired you as a metaphor actually is coming back in my augmented reality design system proposals, because now it's not so metaphorical, it's actually physical, which I think is a really kind of interesting inspiration, right? So I mentioned audience segments, and so this is hot off the press, quite literally. We've just done some work, and Jude, who I mentioned earlier, and Abla Hamilton, another person in my team, they've done this extensive review of a lot of the research projects in our archive, like I say, going back and reuse, as well as doing some current analytics and questionnaires and following up with interviews to come up with who our segments are, because our product management team really wants to understand the segments so that we can think about road mapping and investment. This is all very familiar to you. And here we are. We've got some initial audience segments that we're going to be doing some validation around. There's the learner coming to material, the design influencer, the decision maker, maybe the VP. Who are these people? Maybe it's not the VP, maybe it's some really great design leader, engineering leader, the brand owners. And then there's the makers and adapters. And these segments fit internally and externally, because we're trying to understand what the needs are for these different groups, internally and externally, and they may be slightly different platforms and access for these different groups and these different, whether you're internal or external. But I mentioned earlier that, we're really sort of trying to make sure that things like our material.io site and those touch points in our service, which, as you all know, may be different touch points for different segments, really are available and really are accessible. And I mean accessible in all senses of the word. Both you know that they're there and they're findable, and also if you have any kinds of accessibility needs, you can also access the content. So that's where we are, and this is where we are right now. And so I sort of told you a little bit of a story from 2014 through, oh my goodness, material design is, being used, to setting up the research team, which initially had just 2 researchers. And here you see we've developed the research program and the PM practice and the program management practice. And we've done this all together, learning together, iteratively, swapping things out, trying new things as the team has expanded. And with this analytics effort, we're building a quantitative research team that I'm just looking for folks to join now over in Europe. And we're going to actually really build that team of quantitative user experience researchers at the same time that the data engineers are being brought in, so that we can really build this team together and set the needs and drive the activities because of the needs that we're finding in our user base and our expanding user base, because obviously we want to keep getting more people in. And as of today, the material experience research team, my team, has 20 members. So we've done quite well. We've expanded quite quickly. And those members are research engineers, prototype engineers, quantitative and qualitative researchers. And the boundaries between my team and the other parts of the material design team are very fluid. People are embedded within teams, they work on projects, they spin off out into other projects. So we've also tried to set it up so that there aren't silos for communication, which I think can be deathly if you're trying to do something super innovative. So I'm going to leave you with this, my diagram that I started with, the story that I was telling you of my belief that research engineering and design really do need to come together and converse. And we all speak different languages, so that also takes a little bit of empathy, trust, and psychological safety to be vulnerable, that you don't understand the other side. And we just had a team values building exercise yesterday, again led by Zaina, our program manager, which is really about making sure we put as much energy into creating the culture as the particular activities or processes or products or the end results. And so the substrate of everything has got to be with PM and PGM, product and program management. And so, I've put at the top there, this has been a journey, 2014 for material, 2015, late 2015 from me starting to build the research team to now. And it's been a journey of deepening partnerships, feelings of humbling inadequacy, because I don't know what people are talking about, feelings of joy when I get to share research with people and have people's eyes light up, and frankly, a journey of joy because, as a vocation, this is all about great products for end users, great products for consumers. And I think we're trying to do something really big there by bringing some of these insights through the design system to others who may not have the full training or the time to do the training. So as I say right up there, it takes a village to bring good products to land. And I just want to say thank you for listening, and here are some acknowledgements of some of the people who were involved in discussing this talk with me, but doing some of the foundational work that I have shared with you here. And Steve and MJ were consultants who helped me on my journey. I want to call them, and I give them a big call out as well. And Rich Fulcher is there. Rich is one of the first people to really head up the UX team for material design, and really, was one of the founders, and he has been a fantastic support always for research. So thank you very much for your attention. Really appreciate it. Thanks.